Got it. Okay. Okay, it's being recorded by you, so I'll have to get the video from you, okay? Okay, let's see. I do it again, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna start with tweaking your writing. As you can see, I have a lot of certifications. That is key, and I'll talk about that later. I have every NCRA certification I can have. So I am always learning and I'm always trying to do better. So I'm one of those people that just loves their job. I've always loved my job. I love the little machine. I've 42 years later, I'm still fascinated by the machine. I just can't believe that what we're able to do with this little machine and the way we can do the real time. And I'm always very fascinated by that. So I want to talk to you about my career. And it is such a beautiful thing when your career and a passion come together. And I still have such a passion. I am always mentoring students, and I'm always trying to get more people into the program. I don't know if any of you have seen, we put it all up on Facebook this week, but we started a program at our local high school. And we did the basic training, which is the A to Z, and we did it for sophomores and junior students. And we're going to do another A to Z program in 6 more weeks. And we are actually doing a full steno program through Project Steno and the California Court Reporters Association and Real Time Coach. The 3 of us have partnered together, and we're putting together a high school program. And it is such an innovative, exciting thing because we are in such a shortage nationwide, but especially in California. So I decided to do something about it, and I decided who's going to do it if not me. And I just kept waiting for someone to always, there's always somebody better that's going to do a better job than I could. But I realized right away that why not me? So it just fell into place. And we're starting the program. We're hoping the full-time steno program will be in September. So give us we're asking for prayers at this point. We want to get enough students to do it, and I just really am excited about this. So can you imagine if we got the high school students, high schools across the nation doing a steno program? Our whole shortage would just be gone in 3 years. It would just literally, if we could get seniors to be at least halfway through the program or even fully through the program and take their test as soon as they turn 18, this is fantastic. So I'm really excited. So I like to have my career and this passion come together, but I want to kick it up a notch, and I want you to kick it up a notch. And learning new things, even if it's not something you're ever interested in doing, I'm going to tell you how this is going to help you later on in what you're actually doing. So you have to ask yourself if what you're doing today is getting you any closer to where you want to be tomorrow. If you want to go somewhere, you have to take that first step. And if you're not even stepping out the door, you're never going to get there. So you just need to ask yourself, what is it that I want to do in 5 years, in 10 years? In California, we all thought that we were going to have our jobs forever. We were in the courts and we had plenty of reporters. And then we had the budget crunch in, I think it was 2008. And we just had across the board people laid off that we never imagined could be laid off. My daughter was one of them. She went right into the freelance world because she had expanded her horizons, got her certifications, and wasn't stuck in a tiny little narrow route that she was taking and learning to do other things, and was snapped up by a firm the first day. We sent her resume out on the day, of course, after we stopped crying when you get laid off. So all these people in California got laid off, but my daughter was able to get a job the very next day because of her certifications and the things that she knew how to do. So I just encourage you, where are you going to be in 5 years? Are you sure you're always going to have the job you have today? Are you sure you're not going to have to relocate or have to do something completely different? And this is how I want you to think about your career. I know some people, this might be an old reference. You might not know who this is, because when I talk to high school students, they don't know who this is. But I love Mary Tyler Moore. And she was always a little haphazard and crazy. But this is how I feel we are sometimes. We're always multitasking, and she's on the phone, she's typing, and it says, I'm ironing a blouse with my feet. And I kind of feel that way about our jobs because we always have a lot of a lot of things going on. We have, especially with the remote, we've got the Zoom, we've got multiple screens, we've got all these things we're having to do. We're having recording, we're doing exhibits. There's just a lot to do. And I feel like a little bit like Mary Tyler Moore sometimes. But what I need you to do is to focus on starting. And the road is long, and here's the starting point. And I want you to take the next step. Even if you're never going to do CART, ever, you never think you're going to, I want you to think of the things that I'm going to talk about today and see if it will help you in your actual career. So what I want you to do is change your mindset. With CART and captioning, we are doing things, it's hard to make because I do both. I do verbatim during the day, and with CART and captioning, you don't necessarily have to do exactly verbatim. It is verbatim. Because I'm a verbatim reporter, and I always will be, I really strive to have verbatim in my CART and captioning. But the point of CART is having clear and readable content. Even if you have verbatim and it's not translated and it's not readable, you're not helping anyone access their conference call, the conference. Yeah, you've got it verbatim and you'll be able to later make it clear and readable. But the difference is you have to have it clear and readable as you write it, as it goes out. There's no choosing the conflicts. There's no, oh, I'll fix it. It goes out there. And so just have to think of the person that's trying to get access, and if they can't read it, it doesn't matter if you were verbatim. So if they were talking about the chrysanthemums and the dandelions and the whatever, and you know that the chrysanthemums and dandelions, those things are not going to translate. You already know. You can change it up. I try really hard not to do it, but if chrysanthemums came up, believe me, I would probably say flowers. So you can do that, and that's the hardest part about doing both. You can say the flowers were beautiful in the park instead of saying the chrysanthemums and the marigolds and the petunias, and you can just shorten it, especially if you know it's not in your dictionary. So that's where the mindset changes. It's a little bit of the verbatim, but you got to make it clear and readable. So you have to ask yourself, well, how do I start that? I've had people thought that, well, my real time's pretty good. I think I could just start CART. I'll do it starting it tomorrow. It's not quite that easy. And I had to do a lot of tweaking in my dictionary. And in the process, I became a much better judicial reporter. So the first thing you have to do is I created, let me go to the next slide. I created a whole new user. I'm a Catalyst user. So I do beta testing for all the Catalyst writer products and the software. So I know my software really well. So I knew I had to I have a user, my user is Lisa, and I made a CART user. I copied everything in my system files from my regular user, my judicial user, I call it. And I just made one called CART. So now I have a CART, and I copied everything over that was in my system files, layouts, macros, real-time commands, my dictionaries, a little bit of everything. So now I had to tweak this personal dictionary. I didn't want to touch my judicial dictionary. That is my everyday. I do not want to change speaker IDs. I didn't want to add chevrons to anything. I wanted that to stay intact. So that's what I did. So now I have this user, and it's called CART. So here's my personal dictionary. I went into my personal dictionary, and the first thing I had to do, because every single thing in CART is colloquy, there's no Q&A, you have to have speaker IDs. So I filtered out, I went through and I filtered out everything that had a colloquy symbol in it, and I changed that to colloquy with chevrons. You know what the chevrons are, the little greater than sign, less than sign. So that's how all colloquy starts. I had to take out every single question in that dictionary because it'll never come up as a Q period. So I had to make sure those came up as chevrons, and all answers. And you'd be surprised how many dictionary entries you have that have question and answer, like answer yes, answer no, all of those things I had to go through and change those to where they would have the chevrons. So that's the first thing I did. So now my dictionary, I could have started right there, but I still didn't know so many things. So the next thing you have to be able to do is you have to be able to, oh, my husband just fell, I'm sorry. I could hear him fall. Okay. The next thing you have to be able to do, and I had to learn my software, and this is where your software comes in. Everybody's software does it. And I had to learn to define on the fly. And that is where you, from your writer, or even if you can reach up quickly and do it, but I do it from my writer. So I am able to pop things up when I'm in a session, something's not translating right, I can pop it up, and I have a video I'll show you of that later. So just take note that we're going to be defining on the fly. So I went through and I talked about all of the chevrons. So these are the chevrons right here, and I changed all of those. Okay, here is, the last time I did this, it did not play the audio. So I'm going to start this and you tell me if this plays the audio. If not, I'll talk over it. So somebody give me a thumbs up about 10 seconds. Okay, so this is for when we're doing defining. So let me play how it goes. So I want you to be able to see that what the answer bank comes up, and that's how every time I write the Q&A, this is what happens, that comes up with the chevrons. So you can see that. Okay, so here's where I'm deciding I don't have a speaker in here, or I don't have a define. So I write from my writer. I do this, my thing is deaf, and it pops up this little box, and I define any steno and I tell it what I want it to do, and then it tells it where it wants to go. So let me just show you how that works. I'm gonna let it run and I'll show you. I write the steno. I'll write the steno. It's a little bit behind. It keeps going off, guys. Move it forward. Okay, so say I want to write a J define for IBM. So the steno is, I would write the steno, and then I write the stroke that tells it to go to the next box, and I tell it what I want the stroke to be, and then I tell it to global. So watch how that happens. IB with an asterisk. Now I've done IBM with an asterisk. Told it what I want it to be. And then this is all from my writer. I've never taken my hands off my writer. And now I've told it to go into my case dictionary, and now it's in my dictionary. And this happens a lot in CART because there are lots of names that come up. I never know the subject matter of what I'm going to be doing. And it is so easy to just pop things in really quickly. Otherwise, you have to finger spell them, and I'll talk to you about that. Okay. Let me go skip this video a little further. And that was all about video. Okay. Okay, I want to talk to you about the different speaker ID methods. Now, in judicial writing, I use my top bank, my bottom bank. I use the bottom bank on the left. I use 1, 2, 3, 4. I use 6, 7, 8. Sometimes I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. All vowels, and the top bank. There's just a million things you could use for speakers. The problem with having that in CART is you don't have enough speakers. I do a lot on conference calls, and there could be 10, 15, 20, 30 people on the call, and I don't have enough speakers for all of them. And sometimes they give us the speaker name ahead of time and sometimes they don't. So I'll show you how I do that also. But my number one thing that I choose at the very beginning, they usually give you a list of who the speakers are going to be. So it could just be John, Jim, Debbie, you know, just the first word, first name. If they have the whole name, I'll do it ahead of time. So the first thing I do before I start the job, I decide I'm going to do Deborah with a D in the answer bank. So I use my left hand for all speakers for the initial letter and then the answer bank. So no matter what the name is, if it's Ann, I'm going to do it with an A in the answer symbol. If it's Tim, I'm going to do T with the answer symbol. But what if I have Tim and Tom in the same one? I would do T with the answer symbol. Maybe Tom would be T-O with the answer symbol, or Tim could be T-I. So you get the drift. Now, so I was able to make this work out way better for me in my judicial writing. So now I use, for the when the defendant speaks, I do the D with the answer symbol, answer bank. If the interpreter speaks, I do T with the answer symbol. In juvenile court, the mother, the grandmother, the father, the social worker, you know, there's a lot of people that speak up, probation officer. So now we use all of those. We'll use S and the answer symbol for social worker, F and the answer symbol for the father, or you could do P for the plaintiff, or, you know, whatever you want to do. That translated really well into my judicial writing. Some people are able to do, they like to do like the first syllable twice. I'm not a twice writer because I like to use as few strokes as possible. I'm a very short writer. So, but that is some of the things that they do. Some also use the OIP sound, which is hardly any, you know, it's not a word that you would use very much. There's not many words that have the OIP sound. So you can do that symbol on the left with the letter and the OIP. So same thing I do with the answer symbol, you could do OIP. And this one also has the asterisk. I try not to use the asterisk too much. I use it quite a bit, but I don't use it just like for every little thing I'm going to throw an asterisk in. I know a lot of people, I call them asterisk impaired. I'm not asterisk impaired, but I don't like to overuse it either. So especially for a speaker ID that's going to be something you're writing a lot all day, I prefer not to do that. Okay. This is also how I do speaker IDs. So before I start the speaker ID, I do want to talk about dictionary content. The very first job I did was it was for a man that worked for Google, and he was completely deaf. And well, I wouldn't say completely, but I'd say 85%. And he was having I apologize. He worked for IBM and he was going to Google New York for a job interview. And I was his captioner. My very first job, I was terrified because, first of all, I was not that good at it. I'd only been writing practicing for about a month, and my finger spelling was very slow. That's another thing I had to learn, was finger spelling. And so I was just really worried about, I just got to, you know, this is a big deal for this guy to go to Google and get hired. So what he did was they took that iPad and he set it in front of the guy that was interviewing him, and I just wrote what the guy said, and they wanted me to write his answers too, because he spoke such terrible, it was just so hard to understand. So I was doing my best so that I could help the person that was interviewing understand what he was saying. So it was a really good back and forth, and it worked out really well. I was very pleased. And then they said, okay, hang on, we're going to be going through an elevator. They've got this iPad. We're going into the elevator, and we're going to the restaurant downstairs, and we're going to need you to stay on during the meal so that he could participate with the meal. And they were meeting 5 other people for dinner. And I was thinking, oh, no way. A restaurant is loud. How am I going to hear everybody? Oh, I was just thinking, oh, food. I don't even have that much food in my dictionary. I was terrified. So they put it right in front of him, and I was surprised. But the very first thing out of the waitress's mouth was what kind of wine they wanted. And believe me, I'm a wine connoisseur, but Chardonnay was not in my dictionary, Chianti, Cabernet Sauvignon, none of that was in my dictionary. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to finger spell this stuff at 25 words a minute, because when she started going through the specials, I'm like, I don't have asparagus in my dictionary. When does asparagus ever come up in the judicial writing? So I learned right away that I needed to do some dictionary building. So my dictionary now is very robust, and I transfer things from CART. I put them into my update area so I can easily take those things that I've added in CART. I take those and I add those into my judicial dictionary. About once a month, I'll cross-check them, and so that now my other dictionary is nice and robust. And if you talked about lasagna and asparagus with a little Chianti on the side, it will translate in my real time. But it was pretty scary. And lasagna was not in my dictionary either. So I learned food. I had no food. That's the number one thing I had to do. Okay, back to the speaker IDs. So I often do, I made macros. So if you know your software well enough, I made macros for my writing of speaker IDs. So sometimes you don't know who's speaking. Sometimes you jump on a call and there are 15 people and they just start talking and you don't know who they are. Once in a while, they'll say, John, what do you think of that? So if they do that, I would just say, I would write the word, the answer symbol and John, and then I have a macro, and I'll show you how that works. This video, you're not going to be able to hear it, but I will jump over to where it is. Okay, so they say, oh, and John. So now you can write John, and here I'll show you how that comes up. I'm going to fast forward a little bit through it. Okay, there we go. So if you can see over here on my steno on the right, I wrote the answer symbol, I wrote John, and then I wrote a macro stroke that told it to go back and take the last word and I'll cap it and put a colon on it. So that I can do that really quickly on the fly. It doesn't J define it. And you could also make the dictionary entry where it J defines it. But this comes very automatic to me, so I can do the speaker IDs very quickly. Okay. Keep jumping, guys. Okay. Here's a couple tweaks. This is just for Catalyst, but each software has a similar type of thing that you have to be able to do. If you look right there, there's a hold strokes, and one of the check marks that you have to put in is called longest match plus. Now, I don't use this in my judicial, but I do for CART. And the reason why I do it with CART is you don't want to have a word that has 3 strokes. You don't want it the 2 strokes to come out ahead of time and then reassign it. So say you write federal. Say you wrote it in 3 strokes. You don't want fed and then to come up and then al, and then it goes, oh wait, they're going to backspace those and fix those last 3. What it will do is in your dictionary, if you have anything that's fed or all, if you have something with a stroke afterwards, it will hold it to make sure, is this all by itself or is there something else in your dictionary? And so it puts everything about 1 stroke behind. It's a little disconcerting at first because I'm used to when I write it, it's there on my real-time screen, but this is so the end user doesn't get partials and then backspacing and fixing that. So every CART provider will ask you to make sure that is done. The next thing that you have to make sure that is not checked is a thing called wrap lines at margins. And the difference between that is when you're streaming to an outside party like StreamText or Zoom, it doesn't wrap properly if you have that check mark. So just make sure you uncheck that. So do that. The next thing I have in my dictionary, and I use this every day as well, a forced space stroke. And I just do that with SP on the left. And I use that, it's defined as no autoconvert. And that forces things to like, if you don't want it to hold anymore, that longest match I told you about, if you hit this stroke, it'll just force things out. Now, how I use this in judicial is completely different. So I use this forced stroke all the time. And I use this to keep, for word boundary issues, like it was a 6-pack. It was six packs, say. So I don't want it to come up 66, because if I just wrote six packs, it'd be 66 packs. So I don't want it to be 66 packs. So I'll write 6 and then this forced stroke, and what that does, it stops the translation. It means dump, no more translation, and my next stroke will be a stroke all anew. So there are lots of word boundary issues you could use that for. I use for, like, he had 3 11 550s. So I would write 3 in this SP space on my left hand, and then 11 550s. And that, I used to have to write a comma in between it, and you always have to edit that out. So I don't want to edit. So I just write, I use this a lot in judicial reporting. Okay, you cannot have translate. So everything has to absolutely translate. And if it doesn't, that's when I talk to you about the chrysanthemums and the marigolds. You're going to write flowers, or you're going to fingerspell it. And it was the hardest part of learning CART, was learning how to fingerspell. But my real time now in judicial is superb, because I know what's not in my dictionary. I know names come up all the time. And I actually practice that in my judicial writing in calendar. I would just decide I'm going to write a particular word in fingerspelling all morning. So I took a word like Reyes. My judge's name is Judge Reyes. So I just decided I'm going to fingerspell Reyes every time it comes up today, just to get faster at the fingerspelling, because I was so slow at it. I could do an upper, I could do with the periods, no problem, but I didn't have a lowercase in it, and I was really confused by it. So that was the hardest part that I had to do. So I just practiced that during my judicial writing. And now when a new name comes up, I just fingerspell it at work, and my judge just thinks my real time is great. He has no idea how hard I work to get it that way. And he always says, "Why, you never have anything that I can't read." And I always kind of have to laugh, because I'm fingerspelling things so that you can. He has a definite hearing loss, so he really, really appreciates it. Okay, learn your software. I know everybody says this, but your software, no matter what software you're on, they all have wonderful tips and tricks. And the best thing you could do for any writing, judicial or CART, is to learn your software and spend the time going to some seminars just on your software. We do, we called it brown bag lunching, but we would do on Fridays during COVID, because we were so bored. We just finally said, I said, you know, you guys, you want to just on Friday afternoons, let's at 12:15, I'll do 30 minutes. We'll just take 30 minutes, and I'll just do one little piece of our software, and we'll just have our own little class. And we did about 10 or 15 of them, because people loved them. And I wound up recording them. I wound up putting them on my YouTube channel. I'll talk to you about that later. But you can learn so much from just the people sitting right next to you. And if you know someone that you think that knows their software a little particular more than you do, go to lunch, talk about things. You'd be surprised what you can hear, what you can learn with each other. But I like to attend Case Catalyst software classes. I try to attend those conventions as well, because I'm still learning. Even though I'm beta testing things that are brand new, I'm still learning. And I figure if I can pick up 1 or 2 really good tips that I'm going to use in the rest of my career, it was worth it. So I encourage you to really learn your software. Here's talking again about the fingerspelling. So here's some choices that you can choose. You can do A with an asterisk, like A, B, C, D with the asterisk. You can do them with the commas. You can do them with the periods. So you need upper and lower. So here you can also do the comma with a Z if you add that, or a period with the D. I actually have 3 different alphabets. I have an uppercase, a lowercase, and then I have an uppercase with a period. Like if he says it's John G. Jones, I would get that extra space. I don't like it, so I was able to get that whole alphabet. And if you know your software, you know how to get it in there correctly with the glue stroke and the uncap next and all that. So that's why I say learn your software. So my favorite thing to say is I want to proof my transcript, not edit my transcript. So that was one of the things I always had to edit when I do John J. period Jones. And so now I write it this one way and the periods come out perfectly. You can also practice, I did this in Calendar, I practice writing the defendant's name out. I do, when my calendar starts in the morning, I go through all the defendants and put those in as a job dictionary entry for the day. But I also, as practice, decided I would, every time I heard the defendant's name for the first time, even though I had it defined, I fingerspelled it just to get used to the upper and lower case. And I can do finger spelling just as fast as everything else now, but it took me quite a while. Same with juror names. I just really focused on during jury selection, which if you don't go through the jury voir dire list, a lot of things don't translate. And since my judge has such a hearing loss, he's always looking they call a name and he looks right at my real-time screen. So I really focused on just names, just trying to make sure the name translates. And that's how I got so fast at my finger spelling. So even though you don't want to do CART, I highly recommend you work on finger spelling. You also need to go through and analyze. This is for judicial or CART. It has nothing to do with whether it's CART, but in CART, you cannot have conflicts. You don't have time to choose one or two because like I said, it goes out. And so you've already got a conflict out and then you correct it and erases it. So think about whoever is reading that. They're not reporters and they don't want to read a giant string of 3 things that could possibly be a conflict. So you need to analyze and resolve those things. You also need to choose where your entries go. Like I talked about, I'm constantly adding lots of new language in my CART dictionary. So I have it go to an update area so that I can easily copy those into another user where I have my judicial things. I use a lot of real-time macros, and that's another area. That's a whole class in and of itself, but these are a few of the ones I use a lot, and like cap words, cap defining words, number conversions, job dictionary entries, punctuation. Like I can change. I don't necessarily use this for my CART as much as my judicial, but I can change question marks to periods and add a comma or put a period before the word writer above. I can do all kinds of things all from my writer. So this is an area that you should really focus on in your software. All the softwares have it. So I do as much as I can from my writer. Another really important thing that a lot of people miss out on is resolving the writer issues itself. I have the Luminex 2, and I've heard a lot of people that are not happy with their Luminex and they wonder why. It's because you need to go in and resolve the issues in your writer. Each one of your writers have, and there are people on Facebook that actually well, I'm not sure what you call it, but you can pay them to look at your stuff and what are you dragging, that sort of thing, and they can analyze what you need. Once you get your writer issues figured out, your writing will become so much cleaner. I had a gal that just last year, she just wanted to throw her machine away. She got a new machine and she says, this just doesn't work for me. I just can't write. And I just sat down with her for not even 10 minutes and said, and I was just asking, okay, what is it that you're experiencing? Are you having stacking? She said, well, I drag my P all the time. I said, well, let's fix that. She goes, what do you mean? So I showed her how to go in. If you drag your P all the time, go in and make your P less sensitive. And so I taught her how to do that. And there were a couple other tweaks that were questions, and she actually wrote me the next day. She goes, oh my gosh, I like my writer again. And so learn your writer. And if you don't have a Luminex, even the Diamante has that you can do those on the Diamante. But learn your software and learn your writing products, because they can work for you and not against you. So if you are already a good writer, then what you're trying to do for cart, you don't have to say, oh, I've always got drops and drags. I've always got issues. Well, maybe you don't have to. So look into that. On my particular software, I actually can tell it what I drag and drop. So I tend to drag my K on the left side, and I tend to drag my P on the right side. So I've told my software, if something comes up like the word what, it's supposed to be WHA, and I've dragged that K, so it came up KWHA, it will analyze it and say, well, this is an untranslate, but it'll look and say, wait a minute, if we took away that K, which she said she drags, if we take that away, is that a word? And sure enough, it is. So that is another thing that make your software work for you. So I'm sure they all have it. So look into that. So it's called drag and drop. I had to get familiar with Zoom. I hadn't used Zoom much before COVID, but believe me, we learned it real quick. And WebEx, and there's also Teams, and there's Blue Jeans. There's quite a few different platforms that you can use. But the one thing I had to learn to troubleshoot was I had to learn what an API token was. I'd never heard of that before. But when you do carton captioning, now that Zoom is so prevalent, almost everything is Zoom, they like to have the Zoom be embedded into the Zoom client. So right now it'd be like you're watching Zoom, but I'm captioning, it'll come up on the bottom of Zoom. It's delayed. I don't like the way it comes up, but some people want it, and I'd rather do an outside a real-time feed. We use stream text for most of ours, and I prefer to do it that way because it comes up instantaneously and it's perfect, and Zoom tends to lag sometimes. But I had to learn, new things, and so I had to figure that out. So that right API token and try to figure out what that is. You have to assign that, and you have to make sure you're assigned to do the captioning. So I learned a lot that I would never have learned just by doing the cart. Okay, so on your TV, I encourage you all, even though you don't want to do cart, I encourage you to turn on the captions. And I had to do it for 2 solid weeks, and I'm finally proficient at it, but you would be surprised how difficult it is to watch TV and have the screens, have the captions on the bottom and still be able to follow. It goes really fast. The dialogue is really fast, but it helped me to understand what the end user is having to look at. So I turned the sound off and I watched solidly for 2 weeks. It was hard, and I got it now. I understand why it has to be perfect. I understand that if it's going way too fast for the reader to be able to read, you need to start dropping things because they won't be able to read it. So you might have someone that talks 350 words a minute, and yeah, you're getting it verbatim, but the person on the other end cannot possibly read it that fast, much less listen to it. So you need to be able to take things, like, especially if they're doing phrases that are not necessary to the proceedings, you know what I mean, that kind of things. Those are the kinds of things you'll need to drop. And I had to learn to do that because it's not in my nature to drop. And so I had to work on that a lot. So that was a little disconcerting, but I encourage you to try that with the sound off and the captions on. And here's some places you can practice, just writing, and that's not judicial, and see how difficult it would be to have your stuff translate. You might be surprised how little is translating. So I would encourage you to do that. TED Talks are really good. There are a lot on YouTube, and the subject matter is all over the place. So one day I could be doing anything to do with patents, and the next day I'm doing an IBM class, or I could be doing an IBM conference call. One day I was doing, you know, the Boeing airplane stuff. You just never know what the subject matter is. Same with court. You don't know what you could be talking about almonds one day, and the next day you could be doing a rape case if, you know, if you're going from courtroom to courtroom. So this really gives you an eye-opening look at how much your dictionary can explode by doing other things. Okay, so these are some of the places I've got to work. And I know a lot of you are probably asking how I'm able to do all these things, and I'm an official. And I've been there for 40 years, so you can imagine how much vacation time I have. So when I get asked to do something fun, I take vacation and I go do that. So I'm excited to do some of these fun things. And I do my cart every morning. So I tell the company I work for, I'm available from 5:30 in the morning till 7:30 in the morning, and I can do 1 hour. In that time frame, I could do an hour of anything you want, and then I have to be at work by 8. And I was able to do that because in the old days, you know, I'm an early riser anyway, and in the old days, we got up to do our transcripts in the morning. But now that our computers and technology has advanced so far, I don't have to do my transcripts at home anymore. I can get them done at work. So I had all this time in the morning, and I would get up and, you know, do my word puzzle games. And now I do Wordle every day and do all my word stuff. So it was just an easy transition for me to do that. And it turned out that I really liked that part of it. But these are the places I've actually got to go on their campuses, and I've actually got to do some really fun things. Got to go onto the Apple campus. I got to go onto the Facebook campus, which is everything everybody said it is. Everything's free. It's a huge campus. There's bikes all over. You can just hop on a bike and go get a steak and go get dry cleaning, and it's all paid for. And it was pretty amazing. Mark Zuckerberg walked by me. He was a celebrity. He was part of the celebrity, and they had people all around him. But I was invited by our company that I work for to go and do captioning. They were having the president of India. They were going to interview him, and they wanted the captioning on a big jumbotron for all the participants that were there. So I got to go, and it was just really neat to be able to do that. Same with Google. They have Google conferences now I know you know that Google does a lot of voice recognition stuff, but for their conferences, guess who they have do the captioning? It's not their Google software. They hire court reporters. And so they have these huge, huge conventions, and we're on the Jumbotron, and we're not allowed to speak up and say, wait a minute, this is not Google Translate. I can tell you almost every convention I've ever done, somebody stands up in the audience during the question and answer period, and they make a comment about how wonderful this Google Translate is, and Google never corrects them. So just remember that while they're trying to do all that, they still hire us. Microsoft, I spent time on Microsoft campus. They also hire us to do their conferences, which is amazing since they actually do a lot of voice recognition things as well. And the United Nations is, I've done quite a few things with the company I work for. They do a lot of United Nations stuff. I was able to travel with that, and we also do it remotely now. So I've got some pictures of that. I'll show you some of those things I've got to do. But one of the highlights of my career, I really consider this next one the highlight of my career. Does anybody recognize who this is on the left? He's kind of famous. His name is Tim Cook, and he is the CEO of Apple. And I'm sitting right next to him. Now, I'm the one that took this picture. And that little iPad right there is mine. And that is my real-time cart going onto that iPad. He is interviewing this gal or actually she was interviewing him. And it was a big disability conference that they were having. And so they wanted to have him interviewed, but she couldn't hear. So they hired me to go in, and I sat right there, and I was able, twice he shook my hand. He turned around and said, "This is the most amazing technology. This is just amazing that I'm able to talk to her like there was no difference and no disability." So he thanked me twice. The only thing he did say to me was, and I made sure I brought an iPad because there was no way I was going to set an IBM product in front of him. And I knew we could stream through the iPad. And I told our bosses, we don't normally have iPads and stuff. And I said, I have to take my iPad and I'm going to hook up. There's no way I'm handing him anything but an Apple product. But my computer was a PC. And at the end, after he thanked me twice, at the very end, he walked over and he said, we got to do something about your computer. And I said, I'm sorry. I understand. I know it could be done with Apple, but it's an IBM product and it just works better on PC. And I know and he laughed, but I knew he was going to say something, somebody bringing a PC onto the Apple campus. I knew this was going to be a problem, but he still thanked me and said that the technology was wonderful. So that made me feel good. So here I am in Morocco. I got to travel to Morocco for a week, and I was working for the United Nations treaty. They had a treaty there, 125 countries represented. And when a country spoke, I had to identify them. I didn't even know some of these countries existed, and I had to do a lot of prep for that. Luckily, they tell you who's speaking. It's not, you don't have to go, who's this? And it was difficult, but I had so much fun because it was so different. But this was just right outside the convention center. I'm sitting right outside there, and it was 110 degrees, and they still serve hot tea. It's this mint tea, and I still to this day love the mint tea. So I just love it. So here I am in one of the booths. I'm listening to the English channel. I've got my headset on, and I'm listening to the English channel. And so anytime anybody, and it's up on a big jumbo screen in the building, so that if anybody understands English, no matter who's speaking at the time, they can look up on the jumbo screen and they can see the English translation. It was pretty cool. And here I am in Istanbul. I got to do, this was an internet governance conference for the United Nations where we're talking about net neutrality. And I come home and these kinds of things are on the news and they're talking, I thought, oh my gosh, I was just part of that in Turkey. I got to go and do this. It was just great to be part of history. And here I am with all my notes laid out. I had so much prep, it was ridiculous. And I was nervous and it was difficult, but I really had fun doing it. And here I am at the top of the conference, and you can see below, I don't know if you can see, there's on the left and right hand corner, there are great big jumbotrons, and that was my real time coming across. It was coming up. And it was really neat to be in the room with them and experience how different countries participate and what they do. It was really neat. This is my cart setup at home, which is what I have right now. I've got 2 screens and I have a complete setup at home. So I don't lug my machines back and forth. I have machine setup here. I have computer. I move nothing. So if somebody called me tomorrow and said, hey, can you jump on and take a remote cart job, a church service or something, I can go, sure. And I can just walk in and do it. It's all set up, no problem at all. I've done some meetings and conventions, which are actually kind of fun. The California Court Reporters Association had a business meeting, and the business meetings are probably the most boring thing you can ever sit through. And they asked me to caption it, and I thought, oh, there's no way I'm going to caption this for a group of my peers who understand this technology way better. No, that's way too scary to do that. But I said, I will do it if you let me be funny. And they said, sure, do whatever you want. And so I had a ball just writing my thoughts. So, and the audience was in stitches the whole time. They laughed, and the people on the dais could not see the real time. So they had no clue what the whole audience was laughing about. When the speaker was speaking and you'd start laughing, the speaker had no idea. I would write things like, is this guy ever going to shut up? And just the things that you think about when you're writing and are like, oh God, not again. I would put little parentheticals. It was a lot of fun. So you ought to try to do that. I made sure that I had all of these certifications in place that gave me instant credibility. And the credibility came from hard work. It was just something I continue to always work on. And so that I had the credibility to back it up. So just remember that all progress, it takes place outside your comfort zone, always. And if you don't take that first step, you're not going to ever get anywhere else, and I want you to always progress. So you just have to take that first step. And just remember, every pro was once an amateur, and every expert was once a beginner. So dream big and start now.